Great. So today we are so excited to host Jason Spitkoski from Digital Waters. Jason is a product manager, inventor, innovator, and leader, and he has been doing incredible work at the intersection of sensors, volunteer work, and protecting our waterways. We're so excited to have you here. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Mic check, everyone can hear me all right? Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jason Spitkoski. I've been in the IT industry for the last 25 years, most of that as a software developer, a lot of that as a product manager, and along the way, I had the fortune to be part of a few startups and a lot of interesting projects and organizations. I've been also fortunate in my career to have the opportunity to work from home quite a lot in the last 25 years, and also very privileged to live in midtown Toronto, where I have a lot of very beautiful ravines that I regularly walk my dog through, usually in the middle of the day to take a break from my day job. And it's something that I've been really lucky to have, and it's a beautiful way to enjoy nature, take a break from my life, and really connect. But one of the things that I noticed in a walk some years ago was that the water at the bottom of this ravine is inconsistent in color and in health. The nature of the ravine itself is great, lush forests, lots of birds, lots of things happening, but the water itself is dead. There's never anything in the water. The odd time I've seen a duck, I'm pretty certain they were lost. They didn't stick around long. One of the things that I noticed walking my dog was sometimes the water would be this shade of gray, might be a black gray. Sometimes it would be a shade of green or blue. Sometimes I've seen this kind of crimson red color. It was a little bit nasty to look at. Sometimes the water's clear. It's perfectly clean. It looks healthy. And to be honest, I've been walking along this ravine almost every day for 10 years, and I don't actually know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know what the water color is supposed to be. One day I saw a pipe draining into Yellow Creek, and I took a photo of it, and I called 311, and I talked to a city official about it. I sent them the photo, and they said, "Thank you. We'll have somebody look at it," and usually this gets resolved within a couple hours. Exactly 2 hours later, I got an automated email saying that the issue was resolved. I didn't really believe it, and the next day I went down to the ravine and saw that the issue actually wasn't resolved. One of the things that I thought about is, geez, I wish there was something I could do. I don't know what I expect the city to do when some guy walking his dog takes a picture and sends a photo of some dirty water. I'm not sure what they'd expect to do. So I thought a lot about this, about how it might be good to have sort of a record of our data, of our water data, so that we can see what's been going through our water, till we would see the flow of the water. And I started doing some research. I started investigating. I looked at what we have right now. Certainly water quality isn't sorry, slide issues here. Yeah, maybe it's a lag. Yeah. Oh, there it is. It looks like a lag. Okay, that's cool.
Just do the unshare reshare.
Unshare reshare. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Thank you. So I was looking at some of the water data that was available. There's a lot out there. Certainly, this isn't a new thing. Being concerned about water is not a new thing. There's a lot of people that have put a lot of time and energy into collecting water data. But what I've found is that it's pretty expensive and time-consuming to collect. Usually when we think about collecting water data, good quality water data, it involves somebody physically going to the water, scooping up some water, putting a lid on it, labeling it, shipping it to a lab, and eventually being queued up for analysis at a lab. There's a lot of other steps involved, but it's time-consuming. And because of just the number of steps, it's error-prone. Some water quality kits involve having strips of paper that you put water on to see results, but that's also quite error-prone. Something else that I noticed is that there's incomplete watershed data. If we're lucky, we get water data measurements once a week. usually it's once a month, but actually most of the time we don't get any water measurement at all. So there's incomplete data, and the data that we do have is just going to be for a specific location. We don't have data that describes the health, for example, of a whole watershed. And related to this is that we don't have data that's 24/7. Whenever somebody collects water data, they go to the water's edge, they scoop up the water, and that only happens once you get that data, that sample, that's just one slice in time. Water continuously flows 24/7. And so when we're only collecting a slice of that, we are really missing in on a lot of information. And one of the last things that I observed in my research was that the data that we have isn't it's difficult to be useful. It's ultimately dots on a graph, and it's difficult for me as a random guy walking his dog, but also as a data scientist, it's difficult to act on some of this data. So I collected some this screenshot. This is data collected from a station near the Brickworks, Evergreen Brickworks, close to where I've done my research. And there's a few things that jump out at me. One is that it is really just a bunch of dots on a graph. It's difficult to make actionable insights with this. Other things I've noticed is that the most recent data is from 1987, it looks like, and it goes all the way back to 1972. So it's quite a large time span of data. And when I look at it, it's dots on a graph. I don't know what to make out of this. I can see looking closely that this is temperature per sample. I assume that they do this maybe once a month, or that was the intention. And one of the things that I can see, and I can only see this because I've seen my own data, is that there's a lot of, you can see these are 2-year intervals. So the temperature really fluctuates wildly from mid to high 20s in the summertime to around 0 in the winter. But it's hard for me to really get in and use this information. One of the things in continuing on this is that because we are capturing data in these one sort of segments, segments or intervals once a month, it's really difficult for us to capture a good holistic idea of what's actually happening with our water. Water captured, it doesn't capture the flow of water. As I mentioned, it's 24/7. When I think about water, I think about creeks feeding into streams, feeding into rivers, feeding into lakes, into oceans, evaporating, coming down as rain, and having it as an endless cycle. And we just don't capture that. We miss most water events, including smaller combined sewage overflow events. This is a photo I took in the Yellow Creek a long time ago. I have a lot of these photos, but there's always these pipes that lead into our waterways that might not be very well documented or understood. I don't know exactly where this pipe comes from, but it looks like there's stuff coming into our water all over the place. If you walk down any urban waterway in Toronto, you'll see every 100 meters, pipes and various culverts exiting into our waterways. So after doing this research, and this is having this idea in my head for a number of years, actually, it wasn't until earlier last year that some ideas really started gelling in my mind. Specifically, what I was thinking of is having a full watershed coverage where we would have a low-cost device throughout an entire watershed. Imagine hundreds of devices throughout the Don River Valley, through the Don River watershed even, where all the tributaries and streams, including the Yellow Creek and the Mud Creek that pass by the Brickworks, are monitored. Having all of this data 24/7 so we can see the sort of pulse of our waterways as they flow, as water flows through them and the natural course of water happens. And then combining that data with traditionally captured data collected in jars and analyzed properly at labs where they're ground truthed, and comparing that with the data that we capture from our devices would really give us a wealth of data that we don't have anything like that right now, where we'd have 24/7 data combined with a quality scientifically collected data verified in labs. One of the ideas that we want to do is combine all this data and use artificial intelligence, machine learning to look for patterns, to look for things, to look for anomalies. And this could be anything from anomalies in our water data, but also anomalies in our devices, in our data, in our system themselves, itself. So we see a lot of opportunity for machine learning to process and make valuable insights with all the data that we capture. So on that note, our devices themselves are small. They're meant to be small and portable and affordable. Low cost, we're looking at sub $100, like $200 or less. And we want them to be able to operate in 1 foot of water or more. Bear with me a moment here as the slides catch up. But the idea is that we want to have them inexpensive, portable, so that they could be put in someone's backpack. Several could be put in a backpack, operate in 12 inches of water or more, able to operate in any lighting conditions. And this is an important thing. One of the pieces of data that we're collecting is photographic data of our water. Another thing that I found was that a lot of the data that we do collect is valuable, but I found it difficult to make an emotional connection to it, whereas taking a photo of the water gives us a lot of data. It gives us photographic evidence so that there's always going to have that. We can get the water color. We could also get sediment levels, and we can also see other things in the water. So there's quite a few benefits to using cameras, and also they're low cost. Modern photography has gotten quite inexpensive, and you can get very small cameras that do very well for low cost. And what we've decided to do is take a photo of the water as it passes through our device. And we do that by setting up what we call the light-proof photo chamber, which is a circular disc on the top of the device. It's exactly 5 centimeters deep. And inside that, there's a camera pointing at a surface that's half black, half white. And it takes a photo every few minutes. It also measures the temperature, and we can add other sensors as well for things like dissolved oxygen or pH, acid levels, and other sensors as well. But the idea is that having the ability for water to pass through, but not light, that will allow us to take a photo of the water itself without having external light impacting our data. And by that, I mean, we envision our devices to be, for example, by a street that might have a street light, but also in a sewage tunnel that never sees the light of day. So regardless of the external lighting conditions, it doesn't impact our data that we collect. There's a flash and internal lighting mechanism in the devices so that we do capture the exact same photo regardless of the water, and we can start comparing apples to apples with our visual data. These devices are also designed to be low maintenance. The idea is to have once a week somebody to go out to swap out the batteries, possibly clean the camera lens, and that's it. And I mentioned they can be configured with multiple sensors. This is what I would consider the minimum loadout. So we've had these devices. We put together 3 of these devices, and we deployed them last year around the Yellow Creek, which is a creek that eventually drains into the Don River here in central Toronto. And we had these devices going for about 5 weeks, from the end of October to early December. And we had them collecting data, and we collected all the data. We collected almost 35,000 records in total, 35,000 photographs of the water, 35,000 temperature readings. Oh, and bear with me, just going to reconnect here to the Zoom. But we had all these records and put together, made it all available so that it's all right now available in a cloud. It's all behind an API that you can access right now, RESTful API. Bear with me, I'm just having an internet connection moment. But we put it all into a cloud, and we also put together a dashboard. And the dashboard was really meant to showcase how we wanted to interact with the data. And it's in this slide once I get it going. And basically, we put 3 devices into the water for for more than a month and collected all the data, and we found that there was actually quite a lot of fascinating insights that we gathered. And bear with me just a moment here. Thank you for that excellent emceeing. And thank you for your patience. We're back online. And I was mentioning, we put 3 of these devices in the water. We collected data for about 5 weeks, and we put it all in our cloud. And we also put a dashboard in front of the cloud so that we could give people something to actually sink their teeth into. And we came up with this dashboard. Cool. Yeah, there it is. Great. It's got an animated GIF on it, so maybe that's why I'm taking some time. But basically, this dashboard is all of our data. On the top, you can see that we have temperature graphs on the top with our 3 devices, and on the bottom is going to be the 3 devices where we position them over time, and each of their locations on the map is represented by a color dot. So we calculate what the color of the water is at that specific time and location and put that on the map. And what this slide is supposed to show is us viewing the 5 weeks of data, kind of like a Netflix sort of scrubber where you can see the water flow over the 5 weeks and see it as it changed. And one of the things that we were pretty surprised to see after putting this all together was how much the water changed, and how often the water was inconsistent, just not only from one device from one day to the next, but downstream even. And there's a few things that I wanted to share with you here in our data that we found. The first thing that I wanted to share was how we discovered when a device gets washed ashore. You can see on the final third of our data, we got some zigzagging, especially from the green device, or the device represented by the green color. And what happened there was the device got washed ashore for several days. And so the temperature of air fluctuates a lot more from night and day than it does in the water. And so that's where we see some weird anomalies in our data. And that specific segment of data here is explained by a device being washed ashore. But there's a few other things that we found that were not weird tech things. One is the quality of the water. So one time when I was putting a device in the water, and bear with me on this slide, it's another animated GIF, but I was putting a device in the water, and I noticed that there was 2 to 3 feet of white foam on top of Yellow Creek. And I didn't know what to think of it. It was pretty gross. The water itself was this terracotta, sort of a brick orange. And anyway, I put this device in the water, and looks like I'm disconnecting again, actually. And we were able to see what the water color looked like underneath. And it was pretty crazy to see, actually, and I'll show you in a moment. Oh. Okay, well, I'm not going to be able to show you. This white space with the exclamation mark had a little GIF, and it was a video of this brown water, basically with 2 to 3 feet of foam on top. And it was at October 29th at 4 p.m. And later, when we took a look at the data and compared the event to what happened a few hours later, we saw that the water cleared up right away. And so these are 2 photos. I mentioned earlier that we have a photo chamber with a black, half of it is black, half of it is white. And we took several photos during the course of these 7 hours. And you can see just in 7 hours how much the water can clear up. And certainly just as quickly, it can also get polluted, or it could also get fouled just as quickly, especially when it comes to our urban waterways, where there's just so many other pipes and culverts and things connected to it. So there's a couple other anomalies I wanted to share with you. On this, there's 2 images here. And on the one on the left, it's basically 2 images of the same data. It's about a week of data zoomed in a little bit. Same point, there's a dotted red line, vertical red line in the middle. On the left is a temperature, and on the right is our sediment, our analysis of the sediment of the water. And we could see some relationships. There's a few things here to point out. Drop in sediment correlates to a drop in temperature. So we can see on the sediment chart where the red line is, the green device had a drop in sediment. Suddenly the water cleared up. And if you look on the left-hand side, that same green device also had a corresponding drop in temperature. The temperature tended to drop as the sediment decreased. And there's a little bit of a invert, this correlation is also enforced with, if you look at the blue device here, it has a big spike in temperature, in sediment, and then it has more of a maintained temperature. The temperature doesn't drop as much as it does for the green device that saw a drop in sediment. So one saw a drop in sediment, the other saw an increase. One saw a drop in temperature, and the other saw an increase in temperature. So there's nothing conclusive that we can say with this, but there's definitely some interesting analogies, or not analogies, and interesting correlations here that I think with more data and more analysis, more insights can be derived. Other weird things with this slide is the downstream device showing warmer water than the upstream device. And this could be related to the temperature and the sediment. But if you look at these devices, the topmost device labeled or colored orange, and the bottommost device, which is blue here, they go from upstream to downstream. And you would think that with the temperature, the more downstream you go, the cooler the temperature, because the water's exposed to the air and it cools off much faster. But we don't see that. And we see that rather the middle device, which is the green one, has a lower temperature, whereas downstream and upstream, it has a higher temperature, which doesn't really make sense. And there's a couple possible explanations. There's some valuable context here that's not captured. There's construction. The TRCA, the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, is doing some construction between the green and the blue device. They've completely diverted Yellow Creek. It's in a pipe for a few dozen meters as they do some construction work. I don't know what impact that would have on the data. But there's also Yellow Creek goes underground as it passes underneath Mount Pleasant. And I don't know, but it's very likely that it joins with other city sewage infrastructure or natural waterways underground there, and that might impact our data. So a couple things that we found in our data, and I think that this kind of illustrates where, if we started having machine learning or AI continuously looking at the data, to look at some of these trends and patterns, to start seeing some anomalies and directing our attention towards some of the problem areas that we see with our water. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. Apologies, I wasn't able to get some of those slides out, but there were some videos of some dirty water, and really grateful to have this opportunity to speak with everybody and share what we found. And yeah, happy to talk about it further in our breakout sessions, and certainly if there's any Q&A.
Thank you so much. We've got a Q&A slide, so let's keep it up here.
Cool.
Okay, now we are going to be doing a brief Q&A, and as mentioned before, Jason has graciously agreed to stay to do a breakout session afterwards if you want to discuss further. So the way we'll do Q&A is, if you're in the room, raise your hand and I'll bring this mic over to you. And if you are online, drop a Q in the chat and we'll call on you. We'll do like 2 from the room, 2 online, and go back and forth a little bit. All right, questions in the room? 1, 2, okay.
Hey, I'm Alex. On the device itself, what sensors are on it? And have you thought about putting different types of sensors on it? And how are they actually mounted specifically on the waterway itself to ensure that the device actually doesn't move?
Thanks for the question. The specific sensors that we have right now are a thermometer and a camera. I've mentioned we have about 6 other sensors that we're looking at adding. But it really kind of boils down to objectives and costs. Some of these sensors are more expensive. So our minimum loadout is going to have a thermometer and our camera. And to anchor them in place, there's a couple things we do. We attach, we weight them down, we attach stones to them, or we have an anchor but we also fasten them to the side. So there's kind of, and now especially that we had some wash ashore, we now have a procedure with fail-safe in it where we have both an anchor and they're weighed down and they're also tied in to something on the shoreline so they don't wash away.
Hi there. Great presentation. From a tech point of view, what chip are you looking to use for the AI and ML stuff?
Sorry,
What chip? What board?
What board? Well, we weren't thinking. It's a good. There's a couple of things in that. I don't think we have any plans for any specific hardware. We were looking at some services. Certainly, there's some from big tech. AWS has services, and they also have funding for various organizations, which has been pretty cool. But other than that, we've been looking at Hugging Face solutions. I think we're kind of aiming to more of an open source approach when it comes to that. And in terms of what we envision using the AI for on the devices, I think it would be mostly analyzing photos. So when a device takes the photo, we want to have AI look at it and understand, what exactly is it seeing? Does the device need to be clean, and what specific elements are in the water? How has that changed from the last photo that the device took, and things like that. TBD if that AI will actually live on the devices, or if we'll have a more central repository where it'll just process data as it comes in.
Sweet. We have a question online from Ushnish.
Hi. So my question is water metadata pretty standardized? So is there like a water markup language? And the data you're collecting, could you mark it up in a standard way that'd be recognizable to other devices, organizations, and vice versa?
Yeah, thanks for the question. There are a few data format standards, but my understanding is that they're going to be mostly geared towards the sort of one-off data set, i.e. somebody's out in the field and they collect a sample of water. So we are working with some nonprofit organizations like Swim, Drink, Fish, and DataStream to have our data uploaded into their systems. However, they also don't really have this kind of, they're currently, I don't think they're ready to have this kind of like real-time data where they don't have the infrastructure right now, I don't think. The intention is yes, absolutely, but right now I don't think we're there yet, or at least we're not standardized on this kind of real-time data.
Many questions in the room. Okay, we'll go Jamie, Gabe, and then, yeah.
Hey, just thinking about the analysis of the stuff that you get from the camera, and you mentioned like you would like to use AI to analyze that a little bit, maybe tell you something about the sediment. Are you able already to say anything about the sediment, what type of thing it is based on the color or clarity or anything like that? And how might you go about like training AI to recognize certain pictures as certain types of sediment or whatever?
Yeah, great question. We are not able to right now detect things like phosphates. That's a big item. Phosphates, specifically chlorine, E. coli in the water. We're not able to detect those. My understanding is that all those things are quite costly to detect or to test for, if you can do it at all. I know with E. coli, to be confident or to be sure, it's quite a lengthy process. You can't just like put some electronic thing in the water and get a response, unfortunately. But what we want to do is pair our data with data that is being collected by the science, TRCA, where we will be able to capture things like phosphates that's already there, pair it with our data that's 24, not as rich, but not as many data points, but a lot more data. And basically pair those two data sets together and use AI to start finding correlations between the two, so that we could say that we're not able to predict the presence of E. coli specifically, but we're 80% sure it's there based on the color of the water, this specific thing in the data being there when we saw it there last time, where it turned out to be a positive signature of E. coli. So that's the approach that we want to take, is we're not actually going to be able to detect these things directly, but rather we want to build up enough of a data set so that we can start identifying very high likelihoods of its presence in other data.
Super cool project. Are you aware or have you found other similar initiatives, either like commercial or academic or citizen science, that are trying to that are monitoring waterways in similar ways?
Not really. I know there's a few efforts to collect data, to centralize the data, and to do stuff with the data. But in terms of the devices themselves, I know there's a few commercial products that are quite fancy, and they do have, for example, brushes to defoul sensors and things like that. But as far as I know, those are not community driven, and those are quite expensive, and they're not meant to be left behind or left under the water 24/7, basically. I also am familiar with other efforts by other nonprofits to, for example, use drone footage to do something similar, where even less costly and even more easily take photos of the water from a drone rather than putting devices under the water. So I have seen some related things, but nothing quite like this, and nothing that where the objective is to build, you know, a 24/7 data set of an entire watershed.
I take it at this point you're basically a pilot. Do you have particular plans to scale it up and spread it around? And also, are you talking to the city at all about any of this?
Yeah, it is a pilot. We've been pretty happy with the pilot, and absolutely, I want to scale it up. This year, I'd like to scale it up. We've applied for grants. We started to apply for grants. Tomorrow morning, actually, I'm doing a call, or I'm presenting probably a very similar presentation to the TRCA, the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. So I am in those conversations. There's some interest there, but I think there's also, you know, it's kind of, I think there's also more interest from what I'll describe as community groups. So organizations similar to Don't Mess with the Dawn that might do litter cleanup along the river, but are not themselves directly testing water. So there's opportunities for things like that. There's organizations that do stewardship of parks and areas along the water that are also interested. So there's definitely some momentum and collaboration opportunities that we want to capitalize on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we know we have other questions in the room, but again, we have a breakout session afterwards. Can we give one more round of applause for Jason and Digital Waters?